She said it like a dare, and he accepted it like a verdict. Violet had been hired to clean a penthouse, not to become the obsession of the man who owned it. But the moment she walked in with her mop bucket and her quiet dignity, and the moment Choi Tae-yoon looked up from his whiskey and went completely still, something shifted in the atmosphere of that tower like a fault line cracking beneath still water. He was the most feared crime lord in Seoul. She was the new maid. And yet when she accidentally knocked his entire stack of documents off his glass desk and looked up at him with those wide, furious, completely unapologetic eyes and said, "I'll get that," like she was doing him a favor, Tae-yoon felt something move inside his chest that had not moved in 11 years. Welcome to Afro-Korean Story Hub, besties. Please like, share, and subscribe. The penthouse sat 70 floors above Seoul's glittering skyline, and Violet Ibarra had exactly 15 minutes to clean the east wing before the boss returned from his morning meeting. That was what the housekeeper, Mrs. Song, had told her on her first day. 15 minutes. Not 16. Not 14. 15. The man ran his empire on precision and terrified his staff into matching it. Violet was not terrified. She was exhausted, her feet ached from the agency's previous assignment, and she had rent due in 4 days. Fear was a luxury she could not afford right now. She moved through the east wing with practiced efficiency, her natural hair pinned up under a cloth wrap, her uniform crisp despite the August heat. The penthouse was obscene in its beauty, marble that probably cost more than her entire building. Art she could not name but could feel vibrating with importance. Silence so deep it pressed against her eardrums. She was wiping down the glass desk in the study when the stack of folders slid. She grabbed for them and missed. 300 pages of what were certainly very important documents fanned across the floor like a paper explosion. Violet stood there for exactly 2 seconds, staring. Then she knelt and began collecting them. Those are sorted by regional code. She spun. He was standing in the doorway. Choi Tae-yoon in person was a different experience from Choi Tae-yoon in the staff briefing photograph. The photograph had not captured the controlled stillness of him, the way he filled a doorframe not with bulk but with something invisible and absolute. Dark suit, silver cufflinks, jaw so sharp it looked carved. A thin scar ran along his left collarbone, visible where his shirt button sat open. His eyes were the color of deep water and just as unreadable. "Sort them," she said, because there was nothing else to say. "You don't know the system." "Then explain it to me." Silence. He stared at her. She stared back. Behind her eyes, her heart was doing something unreasonable, but her face remained steady. Tae-yoon crossed the room in 4 steps, knelt beside her without a word, and began sorting the documents himself. His shoulder was 6 inches from her face. She could smell cedar wood and something colder, expensive, and restrained. "Regional codes run northwest to southeast," he said. "Busausen cluster goes first. Incheon secondary. Seoul domestic last." She handed him a stack. Their fingers grazed. He paused. Just for half a second, she noticed. She pretended she hadn't. By the time the documents were restacked, Mrs. Song had appeared in the doorway with an expression of pure horror. Violet stood, smoothed her uniform, and picked up her supplies. "Finish the west wing," she said to no one in particular. She did not look at him again. But as she walked out, she felt his gaze following her like a second shadow. The next day he was there again when she arrived. And the day after that, Violet told herself it was coincidence. She was new to the penthouse rotation, and bosses occasionally worked from home. It meant nothing that he always seemed to be in whatever room she entered, that he never asked her to leave, that he occasionally looked up from his laptop with those unreadable eyes and watched her work like she was something he was trying to solve. She told herself it meant nothing. By the end of the first week, she had learned his rhythms without meaning to. He drank his coffee black at precisely 7:45. He paced the length of the study when he was on difficult calls, 3 steps left, pivot, 3 steps right. He had a habit of loosening his tie at exactly the point when he thought no one was watching. She was always watching. She was not sure when that had started. On Friday evening, she was finishing the bathroom when she heard shouting from the main floor. Not Tae-yoon's voice, someone else. Male, rough, unfamiliar. She came out slowly, mop in hand, and found a man in a leather jacket standing in the center of the living room. He was young, maybe 30, with the coiled energy of someone carrying violence in his pockets. 2 more men stood near the elevator. Tae-yoon stood between them and her. She had not even realized she had walked that far into the room. The Daegu accounts are frozen, the man in the jacket said. You said last week. I said I would look into it. Tae-yoon's voice was completely level. That is not the same thing. Kwon brothers are asking questions. Them ask. Man's eyes drifted past Tae-yoon to Violet. His expression shifted into something that made her spine go tight. New staff, he said. She's leaving, Tae-yoon said. She doesn't have to. The man smiled. It was the wrong kind of smile. What happened next was so fast Violet almost missed it. Tae-yoon stepped to the side, blocking the man's sightline entirely. And when he spoke again, his voice had dropped to something quiet and absolute that made the temperature in the room feel like it had fallen by 10 degrees. Eyes on me, Tae-yoon said. Only on me. Man in the jacket straightened. Something in his posture changed, collapsed inward, the way a dog lowers itself before someone it recognizes as the alpha. Understood, boss. Leave, I'll call you Monday. They left. The elevator closed. Silence reassembled itself in the room. Violet realized she was still holding the mop with both hands. Tae-yoon turned. He looked at her expression and something shifted behind his eyes. You can go, he said, gentle, completely at odds with what she had just witnessed. Almost done with the bathroom. Violet. Her name in his mouth was new. She had not heard him use it before. Go home, she left. But in the elevator, her hands were shaking, not from fear. From something else entirely, something she did not have a clean word for. Later that night, Tae-yoon stood at the floor-to-ceiling window with a glass of whiskey and watched the city below him pulse with its 10 million lights. He pressed 2 fingers to the bridge of his nose. He had run the Choi Syndicate since he was 23. He had done things that would follow him into whatever came after death. He had loved once briefly, and the ending of it had taught him that attachment was a blade you handed to someone else and asked them not to use. He had not made that mistake again, until apparently now, he pressed his phone to his ear. Find out everything about the new cleaning staff, Violet Ibarra. His second-in-command, Park Sung-jin, was quiet for a moment. The maid, the contract employee from Henyang staffing. Another pause. Is there a concern about security? Tae-yoon looked at his reflection in the glass. His own face looked back at him, unreadable, controlled, the face of a man who never did anything without strategy. Just find the file, he said. A few days later, Violet arrived to find a small paper bag on the kitchen counter with her name on it. Inside was a pair of kitchen gloves with reinforced grip. The brand was Japanese, specialized for sensitive skin, the kind sold only at a particular medical supply store on the east side of the city. The skin on her hands cracked in winter from the cleaning products. She had mentioned it once to Mrs. Song in passing. She stood in the kitchen for a long moment looking at the gloves. Then she put them on and went to work. She did not mention them. Neither did he. But that evening when she was carrying a heavy crate of cleaning supplies from the service elevator, he appeared from nowhere and took it from her without a word, and set it in the storage room and walked away. Violet stood in the hallway with empty hands and a feeling in her chest like a bell had just been struck. That evening, Mrs. Song found her in the break room. Boss wants you transferred to permanent rotation, the older woman said. She was looking at Violet carefully. Permanent means 6 days a week. Elevated pay, housing stipend. Violet blinked. I wasn't told about this. You are being told now. Me specifically, Mrs. Song's expression did not change, but something in her eyes shifted. He didn't say. That night, Violet sat on her small apartment floor with her knees to her chest and thought about gloves she had not asked for and a heavy crate lifted without ceremony and the way his voice had said her name once, just once, like he was testing the weight of it. She told herself this was professional consideration. She was good at her job. He valued efficiency. That was all. She accepted the position. The following week brought a change in the penthouse rhythm. There were more meetings. Men came and went at all hours, and Violet learned to move like smoke, present but invisible, absorbing nothing she was not supposed to know. She was good at that. She had been invisible most of her life and had learned that invisibility was not the same as absence. Tae-yoon noticed her anyway. She caught him watching her from the glass wall of his study more than once. Not in the way the man in the leather jacket had watched her. Not predatory, not evaluating. Something quieter. Something that looked, if she were being dangerously honest with herself, like a man who could not help himself. On a rainy Wednesday, she was polishing the floor of the main hallway when she heard him on the phone behind the closed study door. His voice was different on the phone, harder, stripped of the occasional odd gentleness he showed around her. Kwon brothers tested the southern route. They'll try the Incheon port next. A pause. I don't care what it costs. Contain it. Another pause, longer. If anyone goes near her building again, it's not a warning next time. Violet froze. Her building. She was still thinking about it when the study door opened and Tae-yoon came out and nearly walked into her. He stepped back. She stepped back. They looked at each other. Were you listening? His voice was neutral. I was cleaning. In the hallway. That's where hallways typically are. Something moved in the corner of his mouth, almost a smile, almost. Come inside, he said. Close the door. Violet followed him into the study. He stood behind the desk, which she had already come to understand was his chosen position when he wanted structure between himself and whatever he was facing. There are people, he said carefully, who are unhappy with certain decisions I've made recently. Some of those people express their unhappiness through unconventional means. Meaning violence. Meaning yes. He looked at her steadily. My staff is considered an extension of my household. That makes all of you a potential pressure point. You're telling me I could be in danger. I'm telling you that as of last Tuesday you have been moved to the secured building list and 2 of my people are stationed near your apartment complex. Violet stared at him. You assigned guards to my building without asking me. That is an enormous overstep. Yes. Yoon. It was the first time she had used his name without the formal address. She watched him register it, the slight shift in his posture. You can't just make decisions about my life. Made a decision about your safety, he said. Those are not the same thing. She wanted to be angry. She was a little. But underneath the anger was something warmer and more complicated and entirely inconvenient. Someone was looking after her, actively, deliberately, without being asked. She could not remember the last time that had happened. I want to know if something changes, she said finally. I want to know if the risk level increases. Agreed. She turned to leave. Violet, she stopped. The gloves, are they working? She looked down at her hands. Yes. Good. She left. In the hallway, she pressed her back against the wall and closed her eyes for 3 seconds. This was becoming a problem. By the end of the second week, everyone in the penthouse could feel it. Mrs. Song said nothing but watched everything. Park Sung-jin, who visited twice a week for operational briefings, started looking at Violet with the particular expression of a man recalculating a situation he thought he already understood. The tension broke on a Thursday evening when a colleague from the staffing agency, a man named Daniel, arrived to drop off supply orders. He was broad, cheerful, the kind of man who smiled at everything and everyone. He smiled at Violet. He smiled at Violet extensively and with great enthusiasm, leaning against the kitchen counter while she sorted supplies, making her laugh once about something she had already forgotten. He asked for her number in the careful, indirect way that men use when they want to seem casual about something they are not casual about. Tae-yoon appeared in the kitchen doorway. The temperature changed. Daniel straightened. He had the instincts of someone who recognized danger even when it arrived quietly. Supply delivery is complete, Tae-yoon said. His tone was perfectly even. You can go. Of course. Daniel gathered his paperwork. He glanced at Violet with a look that said this conversation is not over, then walked past Tae-yoon and did not look back. Silence. Violet turned around. Tae-yoon was still in the doorway. His jaw was tight. His eyes were doing something she had not seen before, something that looked, despite all his control, like a man holding himself very still because the alternative was worse. That was the delivery person, she said. I know who he was. Was just being friendly. I noticed. She tilted her head. Tae-yoon, are you angry? He did not answer immediately. When he did, his voice was quieter. I have work. He turned. Dinner is in the warming drawer. Mrs. Song left it before she went home. You should eat before the commute. He walked away. Violet stood in the kitchen alone. He had left dinner for her. She ate at the kitchen island in the big, quiet penthouse, and outside Seoul glittered like it was trying to compensate for something. And inside her chest, something she had been refusing to name for 2 weeks pressed against her ribs and insisted on existing. The bathwater incident happened on a Friday. Violet had not expected it. She had not expected any of this, if she were being honest. But that particular Friday she had been cleaning the master bathroom when the plumbing in the east wall made a sound like a dying animal, and then the pipes behind the shower panel burst. Water came fast and cold, and entirely without mercy. She hit the emergency shut-off valve on the wall before she fully understood what she was doing, cutting the flow. But the damage was immediate and absolute. She was soaked from the shoulders down, uniform clinging, hair wrap dissolving, 2 gallons of water spreading across the marble floor. She stood in the middle of it and breathed. Tae-yoon arrived 30 seconds later. He took one look at her and one look at the bathroom and then reached for his phone and made 2 calls in rapid Korean, one to maintenance, one she could not follow. Then he looked at her again. "Are you hurt?" "I'm wet." "That's not what I asked." "I'm fine." He crossed the bathroom in 3 steps, stepping through the water without concern for his very expensive shoes, and checked the pipe himself. She watched him crouch and examine the burst section with the focused efficiency of a man who trusted nothing to others that he could verify himself. "Seal failed," he said. "It should have been replaced 6 months ago. That's on my maintenance team. It's not a catastrophe. You're completely soaked." "Been wet before." He stood. He was very close. The water had not stopped spreading, and they were both standing in it, and his eyes were doing that thing again. That particular stillness that she had started to read as the version of him that was not performing anything. "Come with me," he said. "I need to clean this up. Maintenance will handle it. Come." She followed him through the penthouse to the guest suite at the far end of the West Wing, which was larger than any hotel room she had ever stayed in, and which smelled faintly of cedar and something floral. He opened the en suite bathroom door. "There are clean towels, robe behind the door. I'll have Mrs. Park bring dry clothes from the supply closet." "The supply closet has clothes?" "Staff emergency kit, it's standard." She looked at the bathroom, then at him. "You want me to bathe in your penthouse? You need to get out of those wet clothes before you catch something. The guest suite is the closest option." He met her eyes steadily. "You'll enjoy it. The water pressure is good." Something about the casual certainty of that statement, the absolute absence of any attempt to make it strange, made her want to laugh and also made her feel something warm and inconvenient spread through her chest. "Bathe with me, you will enjoy it," she repeated, one eyebrow raised. "That's quite a sentence to say to your maid." "I said you'll enjoy the water pressure." His expression was completely neutral. "The phrasing is yours." She laughed despite herself. It came out louder than she intended, and she pressed her fingers to her mouth. He watched her laugh with that focused stillness she was starting to recognize as the closest he came to openly wanting something. 30 minutes, he said. "I'll have tea ready." He left. Violet stood alone in the guest suite and looked at the bathroom and the thick white towels and the robe behind the door and took 3 very deliberate breaths. She bathed. The water pressure was, in fact, exceptional. The following morning changed everything. She arrived at the penthouse to find 3 men in the lobby who were not the usual security. They were different, harder-edged, with the particular posture of people who had spent time in situations that required violence and had found themselves well suited to it. Park Sung-jin met her at the elevator. "There's been a development," he said. His face was carefully neutral in the way that meant the opposite of neutral. "The Kwon brothers made a move last night on one of our Busausen operations. 2 of our men are in the hospital. Boss has been up since 3. Violet's stomach dropped. "Is he all right?" Sung-jin looked at her with that recalculating expression. "He's not injured, but the situation is escalating." He paused. "He asked me to tell you that today's schedule is suspended. You don't need to be here." "I'm already here." Anticipated that response. Sung-jin's mouth did something that was not quite a smile. "He said to tell you there is coffee in the kitchen and that you should stay in the East Wing." Violet spent the morning in the East Wing, listening to the controlled storm happening on the other side of the penthouse. Voices. Movement. The particular frequency of a man conducting warfare with a phone and a room full of people who were afraid of him. She cleaned the East Wing twice because she did not know what else to do. Around noon, he appeared in the doorway of the small sitting room where she had finally made herself stop moving and sit. He looked exhausted. Not physically, he was too controlled for that, but somewhere behind his eyes there was a weight that had not been there yesterday. You stayed, he said. I'm on duty. Sungjin told you the schedule was suspended. I heard him. Tae-yoon came into the room and sat in the chair across from her. He did not do this often, sat in her presence without a desk between them, without the architecture of his authority holding the space open. It was different, she felt it. Kwon brothers want the Incheon port contracts, he said. They've decided the best way to acquire them is to make running them too expensive for me to continue. Hurting your people. Will they try again? Certainly. What will you do? He looked at her for a long moment. What I always do, he said. Ensure that the cost of continuing is higher than the cost of stopping. That a threat or a business strategy. In my world, they are frequently the same thing. She thought about the men in the lobby, the weight behind his eyes, the two people in a hospital right now who had been hurt because of the business he ran. Is this what your life is? She asked, not accusing, genuinely asking. Yes, always, always, she nodded slowly. Then how are you still human? He went still. The question had landed somewhere real. She could see it. I'm not always sure that I am, he said quietly. The honesty of it stunned her. She had not expected it from him, this man who controlled rooms and never showed cracks. She looked at his face and saw something she had not let herself see before, not a crime lord, not a powerful and untouchable figure, but a man who had been doing impossible things for so long he had forgotten what ordinary felt like. She reached across and put her hand over his. She did not say anything. Neither did he. They sat like that in the small sitting room while Seoul moved 30 floors below them, and outside the window a bird crossed the sky heading somewhere it was sure of, and inside the room something shifted between them into something they could not take back. He turned his hand over under hers and held it. A few days later, the danger arrived at her door, not the penthouse door, her door. The small apartment building in Mapo where she had lived for 2 years, where she had her 3 plants, and her cracked window, and her collection of second-hand books stacked against the wall. She came home from the penthouse on a Tuesday evening to find the hallway light broken and a man standing near the stairwell. She noticed him because he was not doing anything that people in stairwells do. He was just standing, watching. She walked past him to her door, unlocked it with steady hands, got inside, locked the deadbolt, and then called the number she had been given for exactly this situation. The phone was answered before the second ring. Talk to me, said Sungjin. There is a man in my building hallway. He is not a resident. Brief silence. Describe him. She did. Age, build, jacket color, the particular quality of stillness that reminded her of the men who came to the penthouse with business that required hard faces. Open your door, Sungjin said. Don't move. Minutes later, her phone rang. It was not Sungjin. Are you inside? Tae-yoon's voice was different from any version she had heard before, not the controlled neutrality of the office, not the rare gentleness of private moments, something stripped and urgent. Inside, doors locked. There, what's happening? The Kwons sent someone to identify your location. They know you're connected to my household. His voice went tight around the edges. My team is already at your building. Her throat closed. They targeted me. Violet. Her name and his voice, that particular weight. Nothing will happen to you, I promise you that. You can't always prevent everything. Watch me. She heard shouting outside, distant, then nothing. 20 minutes later, there was a knock at her door. It's me, said Tae-yoon. She opened it. He was in the hallway, no jacket, shirt sleeves rolled, and he looked at her the way she imagined people looked at things they had been terrified of losing and then found again. His eyes moved over her face, her hands checking. Unharmed, he said. Unharmed. He breathed, just one breath deeper than usual. You're not staying here tonight. Tae-yoon. I'm not asking. The man they sent has been removed. There will be more. His eyes held hers. Come back to the penthouse. The guest suite is yours for as long as this takes. She should have argued. She wanted to argue. But his face was doing that thing it had done in the sitting room, showing her something real underneath everything else, and she was tired. And she had 3 plants she loved and a cracked window and a life she had built carefully from very little, and she did not want any of it destroyed because of politics she had nothing to do with. I need to pack a bag, she said. Take your time. She packed. He waited in the hallway. When she came out, he took the bag without asking and they walked to the car waiting outside. And during the entire drive back across the city through Seoul's late-night traffic, He sat beside her close enough that she could feel the warmth of him, and neither of them said a word. She did not need them to, at the penthouse. He showed her the guest suite again and put her bag by the closet and stood in the doorway looking at her with his hands in his pockets. "You should sleep," he said. "Ti-yoon." She crossed the room. She stopped in front of him close. "Thank you." He looked at her, and the control he always carried slipped sideways just slightly, just enough. "Don't thank me," he said. "This is my fault you're in this position. You didn't choose for them to target me. I chose to keep you close to me." His voice was low. "I knew what that would mean eventually. I did it anyway." She looked at him. "Why?" He was quiet for a long moment. The city light came through the window behind her and lit the edges of his face, and he looked like a man standing at the boundary of something he had been telling himself not to cross. "Because I couldn't not," he said finally. "From the first day, I tried." She reached up and touched his jaw. He went completely still, like the feeling was too much to move through. "Stay," she said softly. "Just stay for a while. We don't have to be anything. Just stay." He came inside and sat on the edge of the chair by the window, and she sat on the bed, and they talked until 2 in the morning about nothing and everything, about his early years before the syndicate, about her mother's cooking in Lagos, about what they each wanted from lives that had taken strange shapes. He told her things she suspected he had not told anyone in years. She told him things she kept folded away in the quietest parts of herself. When he finally said goodnight and left, Violet lay in the dark in the beautiful guest suite and pressed her hand to her chest and felt her own heartbeat, fast and sure. And acknowledged to herself what had been true for weeks. She was in love with him. It was a disaster. But it was true. The confession happened during the storm. Seoul's summer storms came without apology, and this one arrived on a Saturday night like it had a personal grievance with the city. Lightning split the sky in long white seams. Rain hit the penthouse windows like something demanding to be let in. Violet was in the kitchen when the power flickered. It came back within seconds, the penthouse's generator kicking in smooth and automatic. But in that brief dark, something changed in the atmosphere of the room. She stood very still with her hands around a mug of tea and listened to the rain and thought about everything she was feeling and could not say. She had been living in the guest suite for 6 days. 6 days of mornings, where he brought her coffee before Mrs. Song arrived, where he sat across from her at the kitchen island and read reports while she ate and neither of them spoke, but the silence was the kind that was full rather than empty. 6 days of evenings where he sought her out, not demanding anything, just near, just present, like proximity was the thing he needed, and he had stopped pretending otherwise. 6 days of being careful with herself, of not letting what she felt show too clearly. Of remembering that she was the maid, and he was the man who owned the building, and 70 floors below them the world operated by rules that had nothing to do with what happened in quiet rooms. She heard his footsteps. He appeared in the kitchen doorway. He had clearly been working, tie loosened, the first 2 buttons of his shirt open. He looked at her and then at the storm outside the window. "Can't sleep," he said. "I was thinking." "About?" She looked at him steadily. "About how to leave." Something crossed his face. Fast, contained, but she saw it. Leave the guest suite. His voice was careful. Leave this situation. She set her mug down. "I've been here 6 days, and the line between what is professional and what isn't has gone somewhere I can't find anymore. I think for both our sakes I should." He came into the kitchen, not quickly but with deliberate steps, and he stopped on the other side of the island from her. "What do you think the line is?" he asked. "You know what it is." "Me." She looked at him. "Brought me coffee this morning and remembered I don't take sugar, and you stood there watching me drink it like it meant something to you. That's not professional." He agreed. "It's not. The gloves and the guards and the way you looked at that delivery man like he had committed a crime by smiling at me. Was looking at you. People look at people, Ti-yoon. Like that." His jaw tightened. "Not at what is mine." The word landed between them and neither of them moved. "Not yours," she said quietly. "I work for you. You know that's not what I mean." "Then say what you mean." Storm pressed against the windows. Lightning flashed, and in its light his face was all sharp angles and something raw that he had stopped trying to manage. "I mean," he said slowly, "that since the first morning you walked into my study and looked at me like I was the least impressive thing in the room, I have not been able to think clearly. I have rearranged staffing assignments and security protocols and my own schedule around the fact of you being in this building." He came around the island. He stopped close enough that she could feel the warmth of him. "I have not wanted anyone to look at you because I cannot stand the idea of you belonging to a world that does not include me." Her heart was loud in her ears. "I have been trying," he continued, his voice lower now, "to be appropriate. To maintain a distance that makes sense given who I am and what I do and the fact that you deserve better than the complications my life carries. But I am done trying." He looked at her face and his eyes held nothing back. "You said you were thinking about how to leave. I am asking you not to." Violet looked at him for a long moment. All the reasons stacked up in her mind, the danger, the power imbalance, the world he lived in that had already sent men to her building to frighten her. All of them real. "All of them true, I'm afraid," she said. "Of me, of this, of wanting something this much and then losing it." Her voice was steady, but her hands were not. "Everyone I have let close has eventually found a reason to leave. I am very good at being useful to people and very bad at being kept." He reached out and took her hands, both of them wrapping them in his, and he held them with a steadiness that felt like something structural, like a foundation. "I am not looking for useful," he said. "I am looking at you." She closed her eyes. "Violet." His voice, her name, that particular weight she had catalogued from the very first time. "Look at me." She looked, he kissed her. Soft at first, careful, the kind of kiss that asks before it takes. Then she answered, and it became something else entirely, the weeks of careful distance collapsing at once, his hands in her hair, her fingers gripping his shirt, the storm outside making the world feel sealed away and private and entirely theirs. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing differently. "Stay," he said against her hair. "Not in the guest suite, with me." She pulled back just enough to see his face. "I need you to understand something first. Me, if we do this, I am not a secret. I am not someone you keep in a separate room and take off the schedule when business comes through. I exist fully or I don't exist in your life at all." He looked at her, and something in his expression went very quiet and very certain. "I know," he said. "I have known since the first week what this would have to be. I am not asking you to be a secret. I am asking you to be mine and to let me be yours." She searched his face, found nothing false in it. "'Kay," she said softly. He exhaled. It was the most human sound she had ever heard from him, relief mixed with something that sounded close to wonder. They stood in the kitchen while the storm raged outside and held each other in the particular way of people who have finally stopped pretending. And Violet thought that this was either the most right thing she had ever done or the beginning of something that would break her entirely. And she found that she could not make herself care which one it turned out to be. The following morning, she woke in his room to sunlight and the sound of him on the phone in the adjoining sitting room, speaking in the low, clipped tones of someone conducting the morning's first round of the permanent war his life required. She lay and listened and thought about the reality of him, not the feeling, but the actual facts. He was the head of a criminal organization. People had been sent to her building to frighten her. The world he moved through was one that had rules she did not know and consequences she could not fully predict. She also thought about the gloves and the coffee and the way he had held her hands in the kitchen and said, "I am looking at you." She got up and went to make breakfast. He found her in the kitchen 20 minutes later and stopped in the doorway looking at her with an expression that did something complicated to her ribcage. "Still here," he said. "I told you I would be." He came and stood beside her at the counter and watched her scramble eggs with the focused attention he gave everything, and she felt it the whole time, warm and a little overwhelming, and thought this was what it felt like to be genuinely seen by someone who had chosen to look. They ate together at the island, and the morning rearranged itself around them like it was making room. 3 days later, the Kwon brothers made their final move. It came through Sungjin at 7 in the evening, a phone call that turned Taeyoon's expression to stone in real time. Violet watched it happen from across the room and felt her stomach drop before he had said a word. He ended the call. He looked at her. "Kwons have taken Sungjin's brother as leverage," he said. His voice was controlled in the way that meant the control was load-bearing. "They want a meeting. Tonight, the old warehouse district in Yongdyungpo. That's a trap. Without question. Then don't go." Sungjin's brother is 22 years old. He works at a restaurant in Itaewon. He has nothing to do with any of this. Violet crossed the room. She stood in front of him and put her hand on his chest and felt his heart beating, fast and deliberate. Listen to me. Going into a trap does not help him. Being smart does. Something shifted in his eyes. He looked at her hand on his chest and then at her face. What would you do? He asked, genuinely asking. I would make them think you're coming alone and walk in with everyone you have. He studied her for a long moment. You have very specific instincts for someone who cleans penthouses. I grew up around people who had to be 10 steps ahead to survive. Some of it was instructive. He almost smiled. He picked up his phone and began making calls. What followed was 3 hours of controlled tension. Violet stayed in the penthouse. She did not pace, did not turn on the television, did not do any of the things people did when they were waiting because they were afraid. She sat in the main room with the lights low and let herself simply feel it, the fear, the care, the reality of what it meant to love someone who lived in danger as a permanent condition. She was not going to pretend the fear wasn't there. She was not going to pretend the love wasn't there either. At 11:47, her phone rang. It's done, Tae-yoon said. His voice was tired, something she heard rarely. Sung-jin's brother is safe. The Kwon situation has been resolved. Resolved how? Permanently. She closed her eyes for a moment. Are you hurt? No. You coming back? A pause. Yes. Then I'll be here. He came back just after midnight. He walked in and she crossed the room and he held her without saying anything for a long time, his face in her hair, his arms around her like he was recalibrating, finding his footing, using her as the fixed point. I'm here, she said against his shoulder. I know. His arms tightened. That's why I was able to go. Later that week, things settled into a new shape. The Kwon threat was gone. The penthouse exhaled. Mrs. Song, who noticed everything and said nothing, started setting 2 places at the kitchen island every morning without being asked. Violet did not return to the guest suite. She also did not return to pretending that what was between them was anything other than what it was. He introduced her to his senior team without preamble or explanation, simply Violet, and let the weight of how he looked at her explain everything the words did not need to. Sung-jin shook her hand with the expression of a man who had been expecting this for some time. Mrs. Song brought her the good tea, the kind kept in the high cabinet. A month passed, then another. She learned his world, not the violence of it but the architecture, the way loyalty worked in his circles, the particular codes of conduct that governed even dangerous people. She learned when to be present in a room and when to absent herself, how to read the temperature of a meeting from the hallway, which of his associates were trustworthy and which wore their trustworthiness like a costume. He learned her world too. He read 2 of her books with the concentrated attention he gave contracts. He called her mother once when Violet was sick with a bad cold and could not hold the phone, and spoke to her in careful English. And her mother had called Violet afterward with a particular tone in her voice that meant she approved and would not say so directly. On a quiet Sunday morning 4 months after the storm night in the kitchen, Tae-yoon put a small box on the kitchen island beside her coffee. She looked at it. She looked at him. He was in the doorway with his hands in his pockets, and for the first time since she had known him, he looked uncertain. The most feared man in Seoul, uncertain. Something about that detail broke her open a little. Open it, he said. She opened it. The ring was not enormous. It was not trying to compensate for anything. It was precise and beautiful, a central stone flanked by 2 smaller ones set in a band that was clearly made for her specific hand, her specific fingers. Someone had paid extraordinary attention. She looked up at him. I had it made 3 weeks ago, he said. I was trying to find the right moment, but I think there is no right moment. There is only the moment when you stop waiting for conditions to be perfect and accept that this is the life and this is the person and that is enough. Tae-yoon, I am not an easy man to love. I know that. He came forward and stopped across the island from her. I live in a world with consequences I cannot always prevent. I will make mistakes. I will occasionally be infuriating. The corner of his mouth moved. I have been told I am controlling. Or twice, she agreed. But I will never leave you wondering if you are chosen. I will never make you invisible. I will spend every remaining day making sure you know that you are the thing that matters most. He held her gaze. Violet, marry me. She had known it was coming. She had felt it building in the texture of recent weeks, in the way he had started saying we, in the morning coffee and the careful, intentional presence of him. She had known, and still the word undid her. "Yes," she said, and her voice broke on it in the best possible way. "Yes." He came around the island and kissed her, and the ring went on her finger, and outside Seoul was doing its usual extraordinary things with light and noise, and the 10 million lives that moved through it. And inside the kitchen, two people held each other and were quiet and were enough. The wedding was small and exactly right. A traditional ceremony combined with elements from her culture, his family's customs woven through with colors and music that her mother had flown in to help choose. Sungjin stood for him. Her best friend Amara flew in from London and cried from the moment the music began. Taeyoon cried too, just once, briefly, when she walked in. He pressed his thumb to the corner of his eye and looked at the ceiling, and then looked at her, and his expression was everything he had ever refused to say out loud all at once. She filed it away to keep forever. The first year of their marriage remade them both in gradual, permanent ways. He stepped back from the most dangerous aspects of his operations, restructuring, transitioning, building something that could exist in the light. It was slow work and sometimes costly, and he did it without fanfare. She started a community music and art program for underprivileged children in Mapo, using a space he funded without her asking, without attaching his name to it. They fought sometimes. About control, about communication, about the way he defaulted to making unilateral decisions when he was afraid, and about the way she defaulted to silence when she felt overwhelmed. They were not easy together, but they were real together, and real turned out to be the thing that held. On a Thursday evening 14 months into their marriage, Violet sat on the edge of the bed in their room and looked at the test in her hands with the particular feeling of someone standing at the edge of something enormous, knowing the step is coming, not quite ready for the size of the joy. He found her there when he came in from the evening. He looked at her face. He looked at the test. He sat beside her slowly. He took her hand. "Are we?" he said quietly. "We are." He was silent for a moment. She felt him breathing, felt the quality of the silence change around him. "I didn't know," he said then, his voice rough around the edges, "that I was still capable of being surprised by happiness." He turned to look at her and his eyes were bright. "You keep doing that to me." She leaned into his shoulder. "I plan to keep doing it for a very long time." His arm came around her. They sat together in the room where the story had really begun, in the city that had held everything, in the life that neither of them had planned and both of them had chosen. And outside the window, Seoul did what it always did, enormous and indifferent and glittering. And inside the room, two people held the beginning of something new between them, like a light they were both afraid to look at directly in case. It turned out to be even more beautiful than they expected. It was. It always would be. And if you made it all the way here, besties, you already know this one hit different. Drop a comment telling me the moment that got you, and don't forget to like and subscribe to Afro-Korean Story Hub, because the next story is already waiting and it will not let you sleep.